want every student here to listen to this. This is the most important thing I'm going to tell you, because between tonight and tomorrow night at this time when the polls close, if you want this bad enough, you can get at least 2,000 or 3,000 more votes on this issue alone. I've spoken on campuses all across America, and I know people don't know this. In this decade, for the first time since World War II and the GI Bill, the United States fell from first in the world to ninth in the world in the percentage of our adults with four-year degrees. We are now 12th in the world in the percentage of our young adults with four-year degrees. And guess what? We are still first in the world in the percentage of our young people going to college. That's why you clapped when Jack said he wanted to make it possible for everybody to finish college. Now, here is the best thing that has happened in Washington in the last 2 years that no one knows. To respond to this, Congress has passed a new student loan law. Here's what it does. It takes $60 billion in inefficient subsidies out of the banking system, where you just basically pay people to make a loan that they ought to make anyway. And it sets aside a loan reserve, and they make the loans direct to the University of Louisville, the University of Kentucky, every college in Kentucky. They get the money. Then they take $40 billion of the $60 billion they saved and allocate it over the next 10 years to make sure that the Pell Grants and the work-study programs and the tax credits and the deductions for tuition keep up with inflation for a whole decade, so you keep ahead. This means the loans will be cheaper. I did this on an optional basis. It saved the average student $1,300 on every $10,000 they had to repay. That's a lot of money. But by far more important, when this dropout thing is a problem, is you will now, under this new student loan program, have the absolute right, every young man and woman that borrows money to go to school, the absolute right to pay that loan back as a small, fixed percent of your income for up to 20 years, never more than 10%, unless if you become a teacher, a nurse, law enforcement officer. You understand what this means? Nobody will ever have to drop out of college again because they're worried about the loan burden. It's revolutionary. And we're going back to number one again. And America is going to come out of this stronger than ever again because of this law. Unless Mr. Paul and his colleagues have their way, because unbelievably enough, while they're not putting it on television, they put it in the fine print of the red meat they serve up to their supporters, and alas, I read that stuff. They promised to repeal this law. That's literally their position is, don't vote for Jack, vote for Rand Paul. And we will repeal the student loan law. We'll make college more expensive. We'll make the loans harder to repay. We'll add $20 billion to the national debt. Why? Because the people want their $60 billion back. That's why. And they don't care if we drop from 12th to 20th to 50th and we compromise your future. But I care, and he cares, and if you care, you will see that people are there voting tomorrow. I'm telling you, I bet anything I've got that not 20% of the people in this audience knew what was in that loan law, and not 20% of you know that the Republicans had promised to repeal it. You've got until the polls close tomorrow to make sure everyone who is a registered voter on this campus knows that fact. Because all these polls you've seen, they're based on a formula that says the overall vote will drop 25% from the presidential race, but people 25 and under, their vote will go down 55%. No, it won't. Not if they know that their future is being assured by electing this great man to the United States Senate. Will you help me make sure people know that? Get on YouTube, get on Facebook, put up signs in every dorm, in every eating establishment. Make sure people don't let this election go by when their whole future is riding on it. Let me tell you something else you don't know. I read this wonderful article over the weekend about these two ladies from Georgia that started the Tea Party movement in their state. These people, they were perfectly sane. They were. I'm not trying to be patronizing. I was impressed. They were just nice people who were appalled by the bailout. We were all appalled by the bailout. President Bush told me it was the only bill he ever signed that nearly made him sick. And the people that did it because they were afraid the whole credit system of the country was going to collapse. And we got to the point where the biggest car dealer in America couldn't finance new cars. It was going to get to the point where you couldn't finance a refrigerator. And so a lot of people who despised it held their nose and did it. Now, you're going to get 92% of the money back. And maybe all of it, you want to get that much. But the point is, we can't ever do it again. It made us sick. Because we gave all that money back to those big banks that caused this meltdown. Then we sit there and read about them making their high-priced salaries and their big bonuses, and everybody that got really hurt by this is still hurt. It made us sick. We can never let it happen again. Here's something you don't know. The Wall Street reform bill that the Congress passed and the President signed has a lot of provisions in it, including saving people $5 billion a year in credit card abuses. The most important thing is this. Number one, it makes these kind of crashes far less likely by saying that these big banks should be treated more like community banks. When Lehman Brothers failed and caused this whole mess, they had $29 at risk for every $1 they had in the bank. Community Bank in Kentucky will loan about $10 for every dollar you put in deposits. So this bill says when they start getting too far away from that, the federal regulators are supposed to make them put more cash aside so you never have to endure a crash like this again. And it won't happen. Now, here's the kicker. Nobody knows this. There's another provision in the bill that says, however, if those clever rascals get around this and they do crash, the next time there will be no bailout. The shareholders and the executives will eat 100% of their gambling losses with America's future. That is the law today. Now, why am I telling you this? And what's that got to do with him? That's the law. Because while our Republican friends are courting the Tea Party activists saying how they hate the bailout, and they're not going to have any more, even though they did the first one, they have promised, if you read their material, to repeal this law, to make future crashes more likely and future bailouts more likely. It's unbelievable, and nobody knows it. We're in a parallel universe. You now know it. Bailouts have already been banned. If you want to keep them banned, you better vote for him. You cannot let them repeal this law. And you need to tell people that on the street tomorrow before they vote. I'm telling you, if everybody in Kentucky knew this, it'd change 3 or 4% of the vote. People hate those bailouts. If they knew they'd been made illegal and that if the other party wins, they're going to repeal that because that's what their supporters on Wall Street want. And by the way, he is absolutely right. The community banks of this country had nothing to do with this and should not be burdened by any of these regulations. And if they want to fix that law, that's where we should all start. Protect the community banks and free them up so they can start loaning money again.